talk about our future and possibly yours. Today on the show, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, the hero of Canton, the man they call Tony. Tony, welcome back to the show, pal.
That was a big introduction, man. I appreciate that. I don't know if I can live up to any of that.
Apparently, all you have to do is be a Firefly fan, and I just, if you get those references, good for you. If you don't, no big deal. It's a big show today. I'm excited about this one. I've been waiting for it a little bit because this one's deeply personal for the two of us on a lot of, I mean, this whole podcast is deeply personal if we're being honest, but this one has like a real special place, I think, in both of our hearts, just because it ties back a lot of good movies. There's just teeing it up, if when we get into the episode and when we get to this movie, not only is there a movie that Tony and I worked on that's very special to the two of us, but there's also a movie in here that literally has left fear in my brain for the rest of my life. Like it traumatized me to no end, to such a point that I would argue it's problematic. And we will touch on what that movie is as we go down the pipeline. So stay tuned and listen to that. A little bit of housekeeping ahead of time. Again, thank you guys and gals and folks so much for listening. We've gotten incredible feedback. Lots and lots of people interested in enjoying the show, enjoying the dialogue, the reviews on iTunes. Guys, I mean, it is humbling and flattering, but we're greedy little pigs and we want more.
Absolutely. As many as we can get. As many reviews, as many ratings,
That's right.
Many emails, whatever we can get, we'll take it, because we want to take your suggestions and incorporate them into the show, and any type of little reviews or anything like that. If you see us coming up on an episode in the 90s, you know, like we're in 1993 now. If you have something from 94 you want us to touch on, maybe something like that, we're happy to do it.
Yeah, I still would love to. Yeah, I would love to know what people's. We're in 93 right now. It's a big year for us. You'll see. But I'd love to know what people's favorite movies are of the 90s. And certainly if you tell us when we are, we'll do the research if you don't know when they came out. And we're happy to maybe even throw those in there once we get some comments. So feel free on the YouTube channel, on Spotify, you can leave comments. You can email us. There's a million different ways in which you can get in touch with us. The Facebook page, Twitter, it's all there for you. So, and we'll give those again, the shout outs for those. But whenever you have chance, if there's something you're wanting us to discuss, we're open. We're open to have that conversation. We love it. We love the feedback. So thank you all very much for all of that. I want to set something up real quick so that you guys know the dynamic, because one of the things that's shown up in the comments a good bit is the dynamic. People like the dynamic that we have. And we've talked about it earlier episodes in case you're just joining for the first time, but some of the things that happen to me are random text messages I get from Tony at random times. And this one, I screenshotted this because I loved it so much. It came to me at Wednesday at 4:30 a.m. and it just says, new show notes are up. Okay, that's good. Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it. Followed by, if you turn on Pluto TV in 4 minutes, the Big Sandwich episode will be on. Now, I got to tell you guys, the Big Sandwich, we're not talking about TV shows on this podcast directly, but the Big Sandwich is something that has lived in infamy with the two of us for decades, and is a reference from a TV show called Wings. And so much so, I think it was your mom threw a surprise 40th party or decades party or whatever she called it. She had some great name for it. Where I was telling somebody else this story recently, where I surprised you in St. Louis. We're going to hang out. And then your mom has gone out and she has traversed the city of St. Louis, and she has handpicked all of yours, your brother's, and your father's favorite dishes for this party. And one of those was a big mother trucking sandwich. And there is nothing, every party needs a big sandwich. You have to have a big sandwich. It's pivotal for life. And that is, I don't have a ton of great, I have a ton of great memories. I don't have a great memory, but I do remember that, and I'll never forget it as long as I live, as being one of the greatest little moments in history.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I mean, all the males in my family on one side have zeros at the end of their birthdays.
That's what it was. Yeah.
So it's like where I turned 40, my brother turned 30, my dad had turned 70 and stuff like that. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, this big sandwich was there. There's a big pizza there too.
There sure was, dude. And unfortunately for me back then, I was trying so hard to do keto, and I was just like, "Oh, screw it! I can't do it. I have to go in." It was a legendarily good party. Again, we've talked about your mom always throwing great parties, but that one is top tier, bro. That was top tier.
I don't want people to think I just randomly shoot you up with text at 4 o'clock. Usually, you have your stuff silenced, so that's the reason
It's
I
true.
do that.
Yeah. The thing is I usually, like, during the school year, I am up at 4 o'clock. So it is not a surprise for me to have text from him at any time of the night, because he knows I'll respond. He's typically still up. We've talked about this before. My morning is his bed. So, like, I'm going, or bedtime, not his bed. That's crazy. But my morning is, my wake up is when often he's like, hey, I'm winding down. So it's always it's a balance that we share. And he does, and fair enough, you do some overseas work, so that makes sense too. But anyway, on the show, we're calling this episode Army of Dorkness. It'll make a lot of sense. If you know me, you know Tony. You certainly know us in that window. A very, very important, not the most important movie of 1993, but one of the most important, and it would serve its place later in our lives. One of the most important movies of 1993 comes out February 19th. What do you remember about did you see that in theaters? Is that something you saw in theaters?
I did. I saw that in theaters. I saw it at Carmike 10. And it was outstanding. I had to kind of play catch up at the time because of the Evil Dead movies and stuff like that. And so I had to go back and rewatch all that material. But and I remember, having to go back and rewatch those movies before seeing it. I was like, I got to catch up again here. So I did that, and yeah, I love Army of Darkness, man. It's just a crazy film from start to finish. It's
absolutely,
there is.
It is. It really is. And I'll be honest with you, I never saw Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. I remember seeing the trailer for Army of Darkness. I don't remember what movie it was in front of, but I remember seeing it. And I remember saying to myself, oh my God, I have to see this movie. So it gets on my list. It might have been in front of Sniper, to be honest with you, with my dad, because I remember, yeah, it probably was. I forced my father, my dad is a retired pediatrician, or at the time he was a pediatrician, very science oriented guy. He did like slapstick comedy, but my God, he hated goofy movies. He just didn't care for them, aside from like the Zucker brothers. He would put up with Zuckers, but that was about as far as it went. And so I was like, Dad, well, you got to take me. And it was rated R, so I couldn't buy a ticket myself. So my dad takes me to go see Army of Darkness. And I've mentioned this possibly before, but I'll say it again. That is the movie he hates more than any movie on the planet. My dad hates that movie to this day. It's the dumbest thing he's ever seen. He can't believe that I made him watch it. But I got to tell you, that movie literally changed it became very important to me as I grew up. It just stuck with me, almost like how Star Wars stuck with me. I'm a big Star Wars fan, but that movie stuck with me. What was it? What do you think it was? Do you think it was because it was made with this sort of adolescent viewpoint that it resonated so much with us? I mean, it was like a Three Stooges movie in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's got great one-liners, which I'm always a sucker for that. I mean, it's got great dialogue, and it's funny, and I like that kind of stuff. I mean, anytime that it's you can do a little bit of horror elements with some humor, great one-liners, fun actors. I mean, I was always a big, Bruce Campbell guy. I mean, he's great. And then, I just all that mixed together in just crazy film is just was pretty much the highlight for me. And I didn't drag anyone with me to this one because I knew my mom hadn't seen any of the previous films and wouldn't be that interested in. I didn't know how much of a horror element there was going to be in this film, so she didn't go with me on this one. I just went by myself.
If you've never seen obviously Evil Dead's now been remade with two versions of it, and there's a third maybe coming out. But if you haven't seen the original Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, Evil Dead 2 is essentially a remake of Evil Dead, just with a little bit better production budget. And they were indie films. These were independent films, but this one is kind of the first foray, Sam Raimi's first foray into a bigger studio movie. And so Dino De Laurentiis gives this guy money, which is, for those that don't know, that is Gia De Laurentiis, the famous food chef person. I think it's her dad or her uncle. There's some relationship there. But gives this guy money to make this movie. And what he makes is not a horror film. He makes really, I guess it's a fantasy comedy kind of horror movie. I mean, it's hard to even put words into the genre of it. It is. It really
like,
does.
All those elements, it's hard to even put it into a genre. I'm sure somebody does, but I mean, to me, it's just got all those different elements. It's hard to do it, you know?
Yeah. It stars Bruce Campbell, who, I mean, you either love Bruce Campbell and you get it, or you don't. And that's just kind of, I think, unfortunately, even for Bruce Campbell, and later on he would be in that, what was it, Burn Notice show, and very popular show, but he was still Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell is Bruce Campbell, and you either enjoy it or you don't. I got to meet him at a Comic-Con once. He's a delightful guy. Absolutely adore him. Anyway, so we go see this movie. It's huge impact on my life. I think about it a lot just because it was so funny, and there's this great gag about, this is my boomstick. And there's, as Tony mentioned, so many great one-liners in this film, but there's a very deep connection to it as it inspired me to understand later on. It inspired me to understand indie films a little bit more. And I don't mean the genre, I mean the process of making an independent film, because Raimi made the first two with such small budgets, and it was all about innovation. It was about filmmaking innovation. And so that resonated with me as I wanted to become a filmmaker. I wanted to be able to innovate myself. And so I fast forward a wee bit in time, I wanted to pay tribute to this movie, some way, shape, or form, because of how important it was. And we were making our fourth movie. It was our fourth film Tony and I had made. And it was, when was it?
2013.
2013. And we're making our fourth film. Posters, you can't really see it, but it's back behind me somewhat. And we're making this movie. And I think I want to set something up that's really important about it. This film is called Convergence, and you can find it on, I think it's on YouTube. I know it's on YouTube, but I'm sure it's for free somewhere too for pirates, but it's on like the streaming services. It was on Netflix. It's not on Netflix anymore, but it's on Amazon and Tubi, I believe, and some other places. If you want to see it, good movie, very personal film for me and Tony, but very personal film for me from a writing and directing perspective. But what's crazy about it is, in the film, it takes place in an abandoned hospital. We needed to find a hospital. And what's crazy, and I was driving by this area today. I gave Tony some photos. Maybe he'll throw them up on the Facebook page. But this we shot it. We needed an abandoned hospital. And I had found one that was literally on the road to the Carmike Theater that we are referencing. So this area of Mobile that we've talked about multiple times was connected on a road called Gerby Road. And Gerby had a hospital on it. It used to be called Knollwood Hospital. It later got bought by another USA Health or somebody else. And this hospital is sitting there, and it's abandoned, except they kept it up. So they didn't just abandon the hospital. I think there's like a couple of offices that were still there. So we go scout it, and we work a deal with them, and they're going to allow us to film in the hospital. So we shoot this whole movie in the hospital. But that's on the road that I've probably driven by that hospital on the way to see movies, including Army of Darkness, 1,000,000 times. I don't know how many times I've driven by it, but it is a lifetime's worth, I assure you. And it's sitting right there. So we get in, we get to film this movie, and we wanted to work in a little reference. I wanted to work in a little reference back. And if you pay attention, the entire time throughout the movie, the main character played by Clayne Crawford, Ben is his name, he wears a t-shirt that the wardrobe department made for us per my request. And it says Klaatu Verata Niktu, which is a reference to Army of Darkness. If you've seen the film, there's a great sequence where he has to just say those words and all the evil goes away, but he doesn't say it correctly. Bruce Campbell does his own thing, and he can't remember the last word. So we put Clayne in that shirt, and he wears it the entire time. It's also the day the Earth stood still, but it all ties back in. It's more about Army of Darkness for us. So he's wearing the shirt the entire time. We finish the movie. The Army of Darkness references in there. There's a shotgun in the movie. There's all kinds of little hidden Army of Darkness moments throughout Convergence. See if you can spot them. Also, I challenge you, if you've never seen it, most people don't see the twist that comes along. In fact, I was at a film festival in Busan, Korea, And I said, I'll buy somebody an ice cream cone if you can tell me what the twist is before it happens. And a whole movie theater, people raising their hands, nobody got it. One guy walks over to me and whispers it in my ear, and I sit there for a second. I was like, this guy's seen this, and he hadn't, allegedly. So I bought him ice cream cone. He got the twist, but most people never see the twist coming. Good movie. Anyway, fun project Convergence was. So we finished the movie. And the reason this was so important is, as a filmmaker, music has always been an important part of not just my life, but Tony's lives. Our relationship, we could actually have a whole separate podcast if we wanted to about music. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely, without question. I mean, that's why we incorporate so much of it here too, as well. But yeah, I mean, it would be a totally different thing in its own right.
And so much of the music was huge. And my big dream as a filmmaker growing up was, I wanted to be able to one day score a movie. So for those with a little inside baseball, scoring a movie, like actually scoring a movie, is very expensive. It's very cost prohibitive. It's certainly on the budget that we had. It's very, very difficult to do. But some way, shape, or form, we were allowed to score, I think it's 5 songs. I think I have the music sheet over here. But we were allowed to score 5 songs. And that means with an actual orchestra. The composer of this movie, which goes back to another episode, the composers rather, were Paige Hamilton from Helmet, right, and then a gentleman named Patrick Kirst, and we talked about them in the previous episode. So Patrick is composing. He's up there composing. Paige is hanging out, and we're watching and listening to the recording. And it was a great bit. But as we first walked in, and this is why I believe it's kismet, it's God, it's whatever you want to align to it. When I first walk in, this was being recorded in Seattle at, I can't remember the name of the college, Bastille maybe, Chapel, something like that. It's in Seattle, just north of Seattle. And I had flown in. It was a whirlwind trip. And we're walking in through this chapel that's been converted into a recording studio for orchestra stuff. And we're walking in, and sitting on the wall is a series of posters. And these posters are variety movies. They did the music for World of Warcraft, not the movie, the video games. They did a bunch of other movies. But one of them is Army of Darkness, because this very studio was, and I had no idea, this is where they recorded the soundtrack for Army of Darkness. So this movie that's so beloved to me and so important to me and hated so much by my father, that movie, we're doing a lifelong dream as a filmmaker. That's a blessing in and of itself. But then to be able to score a movie is another huge one. And here we are, a movie that's just rooted in deep personal stuff. I wrote it after a friend of ours passed away. But we're standing in there, and I look, and there it is, sitting right in front of me, the Army of Darkness poster, and the entire score for that movie was recorded in Seattle at Bastille Chapel. And it is just one of those things where you can call it coincidence all you want, but to me, there's just that's true cinema magic. That's God. That's kismet. Whatever you want to assign to it. That is such a rare treat that utterly blew me away, and will forever be like, it just further etched Army of Darkness as being one of the most important films in the world. However, arguably, Army of Darkness does not do very well in the box office.
Not at all. I mean, luckily for the film, it's in that, it's in an era of true secondary markets, so you're allowed to make a lot more money later on. But I mean, and movies usually get more profitable as movies like that get profitable later on. I mean, luckily it becomes a cult classic, of course.
Oh yeah,
and a big movie, so it becomes profitable later on. But yeah, it doesn't do well right away at all.
I remember. I mean, I have a figure. I have a mocked up Necronomicon. I have Army of Darkness figures. Like, I still love that movie, and I just laugh because it has such a legacy that we were trying to find it. So when DVD, like on VHS, of course I had a VHS copy, but then there were like all these versions on DVD that me and this other guy named Alex and I would just hunt these DVDs because we just wanted every version possible of Army of Darkness. And there's different edits that exist, and there's behind the scenes footage. I'm sure it's on YouTube, but at the time you could only find this information. You could only find these little tidbits by looking for physical media. And it goes back to the same thing. Like, that's lost now, but back in the day, that desire to find that stuff was so wild. But anyway, Army of Darkness, huge movie, obviously very important. There's a lot of references. If you'd like to understand more what I'm talking about, go check out Convergence. Tony and I would would love for you to see it. And if you figure out the ending, I'll buy an ice cream cone, but I doubt you will. That's just the standard thing. So what a huge movie that tees up stuff to set us into this conversation, because it's just going to be one hit after another. I mean, we've already kind of teed it up in the last episode, but after Army of Darkness, could it get any better, Tony?
I mean, yeah. I mean, as far as what just in general from the next movie on the list, or what?
Yeah, I mean, just running down the next couple of weeks here, it is just one kick in the face of awesome after another.
I feel like this is the starting year where I am at the theater every week, and it's just like one movie. There's something I want to see every single week starting this year, and I feel like that's continued through the rest of my life because I'm there all the time. I'm always at the theater, and pretty much every week there's something I want to see now. But starting in '93, because at this point I'm driving, so now I can just take myself to these theaters, which is great. And the next movie that we'll see after Army of Darkness, February 26th, literally the next week, like you said, Falling Down with Michael Douglas.
So
for my 10.
Did I happen to is it possible that was a midnight movie, or we saw a 9 o'clock version of that film?
I saw that as a opening day by myself.
Okay. I remember, I guess it might have been Cliffhanger. It might have been Cliffhanger I'm thinking
Cliffhanger
about.
is one, yes. That comes up later, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's the infamous I fell asleep pretty hard, but that's also a big sandwich story. I think Falling Down is disturbingly a film where there's dated elements in it for sure, because it took place in 1993 or whatever. Shot in 92, I'm sure, but that movie is the sentiment of a lot of people, and I'm not making a political statement. I just mean like that sort of toxic frustration exists more now than ever in some cases, and that movie is like the worst outcome of that. But I know a lot of people that reference that. To this day, I have people in my life who be like, "Dude, I'm about to go Falling Down on this," and it's become like, how is that a verb? But it's a verb. That's how punchy that movie is. And it still is just disturbingly relevant in its own way. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. When I first saw this film, I'm 16 years old. I mean, I'm not anywhere close to what Michael Douglas's character is feeling in this movie. I've never felt anything even remotely similar. So I'm watching the movie. I'm like, oh, this is just kind of a badass, boiling action film where it's just kind of like every scene could have something happen that's more disturbing than the previous scene. And I just loved it because of that. And just the filmmaking element of it is what intrigued me. And the storytelling. But as I've gotten older now I start to understand how he got to the point of where he is in this movie. And I completely understand it. And I'm like, now I understand. Like, now I get it. Now I understand why he might be having a day like that. I mean, like that, like your job and the traffic and everything, just all this stuff combined, can lead to somebody just having those types of mental breaks.
It's really, I rewatched it maybe a year ago. Cause someone said the Falling Down thing to me and I was like, oh man, I'm going to rewatch it. It's, as an adult, my God, that movie, like as kids, it was disturbing because we saw an adult doing something we knew was wrong. Like we know the morality of it is not okay. As an adult though, and I think about applying it to modern time, essentially the dude the character in the movie just starts playing Grand Theft Auto in real life. Like the video game of Grand Theft, he just goes ballistic. And as you go through that process, it's like we've all felt it. We've all done it. We've not done anything like that, but we've all felt those emotions. And here's a story of experiencing that. It's just one of those things where I don't want to say it's timeless, like in a it's good what he does, but it's timeless in the sense of like, it certainly is one of those movies that when you get to a certain age, your understanding of that film changes from being just a thriller with a psychotic break or, a mental break happening to being something where it's like, man, I felt that way. I felt that way a lot. I've never done it, and so it's a real interesting escapism sort of fantasy element that comes through in that film. And his performance in that movie is so good. I remember seeing it and thinking to myself the first time I saw it, I never thought I'd see Michael Douglas like that.
Yeah, he's weird because like he's always been kind of a hero-y guy, playing more hero type roles as his leads and stuff like that, and then he kind of comes off and just boom, just nails this character that's just pretty offbeat for him. But I mean, you watch and you just go, I don't know that anyone else could have played that nearly as good. Quite
No
honestly,
way.
I mean, he was perfect, and the movie's just absolutely brilliant on so many levels, and I love it to this day. I loved it when I first saw it, sitting in the theater by myself, going wow, and then now even to this day, I just think the movie is fabulous and well done. Maybe Schumacher's best work for sure.
That's what I was about to say is Schumacher has a roller coaster of filmmaking, but that movie, my God, it also holds up visually. Like if I want to be a film nerd for a second and be a director of photography and criticize it from that, it holds up on that level. It is a oddly disturbingly beautiful film. It has the right amount of grit to it and vibe, and it really is. It is something that you will not see a movie like that ever again because it's just too real nowadays. But in that element, it is one of those movies where it's like, oh God, the weight of that film just carries forever. Great stuff.
When I first saw it, I mean, you wouldn't have put a political aspect on it or anything like that. You didn't think about it like that. Nowadays,
Yep.
everyone they'd throw, politics into the mix too much, and that it would get overplayed in that realm with the social media and everything like that. But back then in 1983, it was just a lot of fun to watch.
Now, one of our things that becomes important to us is as we go through the show and talk about things, I think it's because of our friendship. I still to this day, and I think I'm not going to speak for you. I'll let you throw your 2 cents in, but I think we both still have an affinity for the buddy picture. We've always been drawn to buddy pictures. And so I'm looking at the list here, and I haven't seen this movie in a very, 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 very long time, but you have queued up here Amos and Andrew, and that is a ultimate buddy picture if there was one. Talk us through that movie, because it's definitely, I think, a forgotten film.
Yeah, it is kind of a forgotten film. I mean, and it didn't do all that well. It was one of those films that kind of got lost in the shuffle. But I mean, it's kind of got, it's a younger Nicolas Cage, and a Samuel L. Jackson that hadn't quite hit the big Samuel L. Jackson roles yet for the most part, and they're in this movie together, and they're pretty much in every scene, and they're great together. And I remember being at the Dollar Theater watching this movie, but I remember so many trailers leading into this for this movie. And I was like, I just really want to see it. It looks really funny. And it's a humorous movie. Two great actors of the generation together in kind of an earlier role in an earlier picture for them. And they play off each other so well. And if you haven't seen Amos and Andrew, it's definitely a pick, because I just feel like you'll get a laugh. You'll get to see two great actors that you definitely know, and there's a lot of humor in it.
It is fun, and a lot of this, I hope that if anybody's watching along at home, whether it's the pick of the week or whatever it might be, it is fun in a lot of these. Like I think I mentioned, or maybe I didn't, but like last week I rewatched The Rock. I just hadn't seen it in a while and just felt like watching it. But it's interesting to go back and see actors' careers that them now, and they're so well established, and they're known as being powerhouses, and you go back to before they broke, before their big push out, and you see them, and their performance and their ability is already there. It's already in motion. It just wasn't quite the right timing, or maybe there was a directorial element, whatever it might be, that just didn't give them the breakthrough yet. But both of them, like Amos and Andrew, is another example of these two guys are on a trajectory for absolute amazing things. It just hasn't quite happened for them yet. So it's kind of fun to see all that great performance just before it breaks. It's kind of like being able to go back in time and find that band that nobody's heard of, and you get to say you heard them first,
And it's got a brilliant a group of guest stars and co-stars. I mean, Dabney Coleman's in it. Michael Lerner is in it, who I worked with on a movie called The Last Time. As a matter of fact, I gotta tell the Michael Lerner story real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant, and the person who's involved, I'm not gonna name him by name because it's a little bit of a humiliation element to it. But I know he's listening to this, and he'll know exactly who he is when he hears it. But we were doing a movie called The Last Time with Michael Keaton and Brendan Fraser in New Orleans, which is the movie that we had to escape Hurricane Katrina for.
That's right.
And Michael Lerner is in this film, and we are having kind of a rough day at a hotel filming a party scene. And we're all spread out, and we're on different floors, and I'm at base camp, and we're just everywhere. And I get a call from the first AD, who I am going to name by name because he won't care. But my buddy Brian Pitt calls me on the phone. He's like, "Dude, you got to get up here," because he goes, "The second AD's head's about to explode." He said, the production assistant, who I'm not going to name by name, has brought Michael Lerner up here in his underwear for the scene. He hasn't even changed into his pants. And he goes, "If you don't get up here, I'm going to lose it." And so I got up there really fast. It was absolutely hilarious. To this day, I still joke about Michael Lerner being in his underwear coming up to the set. And I don't know how that happened. I don't know how the guy comes to set for the scene in his underwear, but it did happen. This is a true story. But he was absolutely a great guy. I mean, we've lost him, and we lost Dabney Coleman. I didn't work with Dabney, but I did work with Michael Lerner, who was an absolutely wonderful guy, and he's very good in this movie as well.
Yeah, it's that's one of those questions that when you work in the film industry, I know we have some industry insiders that listen to this. They're all scratching their head right now, like, how? Yeah, that's one of those, like, in the industry, so everybody knows. I give away inside baseball. There's a great quote that's like, you probably got from Brian. He might have done this over one, but he probably was like, "Hey Tony, go to 2, please." When you hear that, that usually means when someone says go to 2, that's a signal that we have to have a discreet private conversation very quickly that's urgent, and it's just kind of come a thing of like, go to 2, please.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so I'm sure that
he didn't even bother with that. He just called me on the cell phone and said, "Get your ass up here right now."
even better. Even better.
He bypassed that whole thing. Yeah.
Oh no, I totally get it. All right, so this tees up a movie that I remember seeing. I don't remember if I saw it with you or Jonathan Green, but I remember seeing a movie that is all, I don't even think I've ever seen the first one. I think there's subsequent. I think this is another one of those examples of multiple sequels. And I think the sequel starred the muscular guy from, what was that show with Stacy? What's her face? It was a TGIF show. Anyway, Cody was his name on that show. Step by Step, maybe?
He's not,
but he's in the third one. He's in the third one.
He's not in this one.
Yeah. So the movie we're talking about is called Best of the Best 2, and it is a completely awesome action movie. I have not seen it in years, but it is a completely awesome action movie. Tee this one up, because I think it's a hidden gem.
This is a hidden gem. There's no doubt about it. I had seen the first one, so I was actually kind of pumped up for this, but I didn't actually get to see it in theaters. This was a far more rental. One of the which is the place that's right next to the Dollar Theater that we talked about, and I could rent movies in there with these coupons for 30 cents.
Right.
And so I this was one of the, I would go and rent 6 movies at a time, which was the maximum amount of movies you could rent. And so I would rent 6 movies for 30 cents a piece, which is just obscene. But I did it, and I would watch them over the course of an entire weekend. This was one of those movies. And I absolutely loved every second of it. It's Eric Roberts' best movie.
100%.
It might be. And quite honestly, Chris Penn is brilliant in this, although I hate to be spoiler alert, but he does get killed in it. But he does. But I mean,
But the best part about it is it's such a good action movie
Oh, it's great.
where and it's a martial arts action movie, and it really is. It's what made me go try and watch other Eric Roberts movies. Not so much, but this one,
This
Best
is
of the Best
really
too.
good.
But correct me if I'm wrong. The first Best of the Best is an action movie, but it's a sports movie. It is
Right.
100% a sports movie. This is not a sports movie. This is a
No.
true action movie.
No, this one they I guess they decided to go like take the popularity of movies like Kickboxer and stuff like that, and take that element of like of fighting and take that element of fighting to the death, type of element, and that's what they do, and it's just brilliant from start to finish. I mean, I was floored watching this movie. I was like, this is, I had seen the first one. I knew what I was getting myself into. And like you said, it's pretty much a sports related film. And then all of a sudden you got Chris Penn fighting to the death. And I was, what is going on? And yeah, Eric Roberts has to go and defend him and defend his honor and all this stuff. I mean, it's a time honored cliche storyline for the most part, but the action in this is brilliant and the movie's really good. And it's probably the best film any of these guys have ever been in, quite honestly. I mean, Chris Penn's been in some good stuff, don't get me wrong, but I mean, and Eric's been in some good movies, but this is really an underrated film.
Look, again, I haven't seen it in years, but I mean, I just remember falling in love with that movie with Best of the Best 2 so much. I probably rented it 4 or 5 times, most likely from Movie Gallery. I loved it. I loved that movie. And I've said it before on the show. I'm a big sucker for at the time. I don't mean this in a negative connotation by any means, of B action movies. Not B horror, not B sci-fi. Although I did enjoy a lot of B sci-fi, but I loved B action movies. And this was like a B plus plus. It was almost an A. It just was.
Yeah.
You could tell now I can see that there's production value issues, but like it's so close. Such a great film. The funny part is it's also like that UFC vibe before the UFC is even going on, really. Like at that point, if the UFC exists, it's in 2 states. If I remember correctly, it was very limited where the UFC could even happen.
At the time, Jean-Claude was doing all of his action movies like Lionheart and Death Warrant and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was a popular genre to kind of switch it over completely and do a movie about, fighting to the death in kind of an octagon UFC type setting. And it was, yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting it. And it's one of those movies probably in my life, and there's several of them that I didn't have any expectations going in, and boom, exceeded everything.
Yep.
That's a really good movie. I highly recommend it. I mean, it's everyone's gonna be like, "What, Eric Roberts?" But yeah, no, it's don't go in like that because he's really good in it.
He really is. He really is solid. And like I said, I watched it a ton of times. Unlike this next movie, which I've only seen 1 time in my entire life because it traumatized the ever-loving crap out of me. I cannot watch this movie. I know the story. I've listened to interviews with the guy that on Coast to Coast because I'm a weirdo and listen. I cannot handle this movie. It quite literally disturbed me so much that I don't have like a phobia in the sense of phobias, but I do not like gray aliens. I'll watch the movie Aliens. I'll watch any Star Trek, Star Wars, any of that. But when it comes to this movie, I will absolutely not watch it. I will also not watch the movie Communion, which is very similar, but this one is horrific. I am clearly I'm on a tear with it. I don't even remember watching this movie except for the 1 time at the beach. And that's why I'm saying I've only seen it 1 time. And it screwed me up down there. Holy crap. Fire in the Sky is the scariest film ever made. Terrified of it. If I would drop an F-bomb, it would be for that movie. Right there. An F-bomb.
You got to set up where we watch this film. I mean, because it's your parents' beach house. And I mean, it's not like it's a pretty secluded area.
Oh God, yes.
So you got to set it up. So the setup is what leads into this movie, and that's why it's such a brilliant story to me, because It's just where we end up going and where we watch this movie is
It's
pretty
not the same
important.
night as it's not the same night as the four wheeler or of Stuck on Dolphin Island,
not-
though, right?
It's not the same
Oh,
night.
thank God. Oh, that was a hard one. Another story for another episode. So to tee this up, my parents did, if I'm not mistaken, this would have been the two house scenario. So my parents, is that right? Was it the two houses? Is that memory serves?
I thought this was just we all stayed in one house. Oh no, yeah, it was two houses. You're right. You're
Yeah.
right.
So my parents bought a vacation home, and it was an older house, and they loved it and they were happy with it. And then they decided to build another house right next door that had a breezeway between them that they could lock, so they could rent the one house out, and then they would have their own vacation rental. Basically, they'd have their own home that they could go to as well. But if they had guests or whatever. But what made it amazing for us as young men is that my parents basically created an entire fraternity house attached to their house, because me and Tony and our buddies throughout most of high school that they had that house, we would all, I mean, what else would you want? You literally have your own house. We would go down there. We would have, I don't remember if this early we had alcohol, but at some point we might have had a beverage or two. Not in this story, but later on. But we would go down there and have, like, we were just boys at the beach, and it was safe and controlled. We didn't have our car keys, except for one time, Jeff Worley. Shout out for your stupidity, sir. We'll get to that story. Good grief. He was not drinking that night either. There's no alcohol involved in that story. But anyway, so you had these two side by side houses. But the thing was, this area of we're talking about is called Dolphin Island. And at the time it was not very developed. So you would have sparse houses. So you're basically in this house by yourself or with your buddies, detached, on your own, independent. It's quiet. It's so quiet on Dolphin Island. All you hear is waves. You're literally alone. And then we watch a movie about being abducted by friggin' aliens from the woods, and it's a group of dudes and one of them gets stolen. It's the perfect setup for the most worst event of my entire life.
So we rented this movie from down the street at that little convenience store.
Oh my
which
God.
has
Yeah.
like, I mean, I 2 or 3 racks of movies. It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Oh
like
yeah.
a
Well,
little,
they had more porno.
yeah.
Yeah. They had more pornography than they did porno movies than they did actual movies, by the way. I think it was called Ship and Shore at the time. Shout out to Ship and Shore, not throwing you under the bus, but you guys had a dirty section.
No, they had enough good movies, and we were like, let's rent Fire in the Sky, which was a brilliant idea at the time, until we actually watched it. It's a good movie, though.
Oh, it's well made, but I'll never watch it again. I can't go past the fact that, again, Travis, I think is his first name. I can't remember his last name. The character.
Travis Walton. Yeah.
Travis Walton. Thank you. I've listened to him talk about it. I've because it's a crazy abduction story. The cast in that movie is just rock solid, though.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
all great dudes that you love. I mean, you have Richard Patrick. Oh, wait, is it Richard?
No, it's they got Robert Patrick and Craig.
Robert Patrick. Richard's his brother. Sorry, Richard's in Filter. Robert is the movie star.
Robert Patrick, Craig Schaefer, Peter Berg. Yeah, I mean it's
Peter Berg.
It is. Peter
Oh,
Berg.
I forgot that.
Yeah, no, it's a great cast, man. It's brilliant. I mean, it's a
DB
great
Sweeney. Is it DB Sweeney too?
DB Sweeney, who I would work with.
Yeah.
Later on down the road, on a TV show that was kind of sci-fi-ish with Jericho, CBS.
Yeah, Jericho is awesome. What a great show. Another hidden gem. It's still out there. You can find it on Paramount Network, I think.
Yep. Yeah, it's a dynamite cast for sure. I mean, they're all buddies, and yeah, I mean it's
The way that movie works, though, is that they have a fight. One of them gets out of the car. They see the UFO. I can't even. Again, I know this. The movie does a very long process of setting up this mystery that a man has been. They don't even talk about abduction. They're just talking. They actually are accused of killing him and hiding the body. I mean, it does. It's a well-made movie for this concept, and they set it up. But the payoff is what just does the scarring in my eye holes in my brain. And it's the abduction sequence of what happens. I think it's DB Sweeney that gets taken, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's what happens to DB Sweeney. If you've never seen this movie, if you're not afraid of aliens, well, welcome to being afraid of aliens. But also, it is still to this day the most horrifically scary concept. I have not seen anybody else touch the abduction scenario as terrifyingly. That movie is disturbingly real. And I think it's the way that they introduce the abduction is because they go through, they build on it, and the I don't know who directed, but they carefully hold this moment, this horrific moment from the audience until the last, I mean, it is prime filmmaking, the last possible second. And when you get that, it's not like modern movies. Modern movies would have shown that to us right away because they need it for the trailer cuts. They didn't do that. They sat on it and they waited. And when you get it revealed, it is brutal, brutal, brutal. We'll never watch it again. Thanks for bringing it up. I probably won't sleep tonight.
Well, it's directed by Robert Lieberman, who also oddly directed some of the Mighty Ducks films.
What?
and it also has Henry Thomas, who we worked with.
Sure does.
And
sure
Henry
does.
Thomas, who we did a movie called Dead Birds with, a horror movie. If you haven't seen that, check that one out. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, it's an intense movie, and I vividly remember this whole incident because I was supposed to go to a New Orleans Saints football game with my dad, and it was the first game of the season. They were playing the Houston Oilers. They were the Houston Oilers in 1993. So I was supposed to go to this game, and my dad had asked if a friend of his could go instead. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And so I went to the beach house because I was like, well, I'm going to go to the beach house. And it all worked out. And so I went to the beach house, and this was like the first time I had been down there. So,
oh boy.
So we decided to rent this movie, Fire in the Sky. And at the time, I mean, there were several different layouts for furniture in that beach house over the course of the years. But this one was like when you first walked in, you saw the kitchen, and then right along the kitchen was the couch and all that stuff. It was turned to the left.
Yeah.
And so we were all piled onto this like couch and pull out watching this movie. And it was just a few of us. There'd be more people that would end up at these beach house parties later on, but
I know it had to have been my cousin Wade. Wade had to have been there.
It's the same people in 1993 for most of the year, and it's you, me, your cousin, and Sam Robinson.
That's it. There we go. Oh, geez, Louise. There are some stories there, boy.
We were all terrified of this film.
Oh yeah.
When we watched it, it was pretty crazy. As a matter of fact, we really didn't want to go outside afterwards at all, even though it was a really nice beach house, secluded setting that you could just kind of go out and do whatever you wanted. But it was no, we're good. We're just going to hang out inside after watching this. Pretty intense film. Pretty intense.
Oh, it is hands down. Like I said, I cannot get back to it. I'll never get back. It's not the kind of thing that I will say that like those this is one of the it's your first experience with it, but those beach house memories are super important. They're wonderful places. Very, very fortunate to have that in our lives, and grateful for my parents and all their hard work that got us to that point. But I mean, that beach house and that whole scenario is like, that was some of the most enriching times because it, for some reason down there, and I think it's the same, I think it's because you are secluded and it's quiet, but there's some like real nice growth moments where, you know, as young men, we talked about stuff and had these more intellectual, at the time, what we thought were intellectual conversations, and we built each other up and that kind of thing. And then some of the stupidest crap that's ever happened to us also happened at that beach house, which is a story for another day. But like, that place is really crazy, but it is definitely earmarked by that stupid ass movie. My goodness gracious.
Yeah, it was a fun one for sure. I mean, And it's just it's a hilarious movie because I mean not a hilarious movie, but it's hilarious that Robert Lieberman did that film because I mean, like I said, he did D3 Mighty Ducks. He did All I Want for Christmas in 1991. So he was not the. I mean, like he did All I Want for Christmas in 1991, and then shot Fire in the Sky. I mean,
Right.
it's just bizarre.
Yeah.
Usually, because I mean, most people that know how directors are picked, they usually try to find the genre. Like, oh,
That's right.
I'm we're doing a horror movie. Let's go get a horror director. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
Somebody who understands horror. We're doing a comedy. Let's go get a comedy director, somebody who understands comedy. And yes, there are crossovers, and yes, there are directors who do both. And obviously, guys like Steven Spielberg can do whatever the heck they want. But usually guys like Lieberman are kind of typecast and genred, to where they best fit. And so when a guy's doing a Christmas movie, it's kind of odd that all of a sudden he shot Fire in the Sky. And I brought this movie up to DB Sweeney when I worked with him because we did a couple episodes on that show, and I was like, "Man, I saw Fire in the Sky, and it was pretty mortifying." And he's like, "Dude, you thought it was mortifying watching it?" He goes, "I was living it." It was pretty intense.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, I was like, "Man." And he goes, "He was a pretty intense movie. He would tell me stories about it, and I was blown away." But super nice guy, really easy to talk to, and easy to work with, easy to work with gentlemen. So
I interviewed him once. It was weird. He came by the old studio, and I don't remember what it was for. He was in town on maybe another movie, but he came to the old Mudbrick Studios,
oh right,
and he came in, and I interviewed him, and I don't remember. Like I said, it might have been ADR. I can't remember, but he was there for a reason, and he was just the most pleasant dude. He had no and this is still in his sort of heyday element. Not that he's gone from that, but I mean, it was when his name was maybe a little more prominent, but he just was just so genuinely nice. And I just remember earmarking in my brain, like, golly, that's great. Like he's one of the good guys, he's one of those guys that
yeah,
we would like. I got a question for you though. Who won that game? Do you remember that?
yeah, I do. So here's the other part of that story is this is back before we have everyone's got a cell phone that has scores on it and apps and all these great things that we have now. So I hadn't even watched the game really that much that night or anything like that down at the beach house, and so I didn't really know what all happened. I called my dad on a landline the very next day from the beach house and talked to him about that game. And he's like, "Oh, dude, it was great. We got down 21-0 and then came back and won 33-21. It was
Oh
awesome."
my God.
And I was like, "Dang it! I missed that game to watch a movie that now I'm going to be worried about it being abducted by aliens." But we had a lot of fun though.
It worked out well. One of the things that happened over the past since we've last been on the air, and I wanted to bring this up is, one thing that's happened for me is talking about this and having this show has somewhat renewed my interest. Not to say that I didn't go to the theater, but I have little kids, so it was more selective. But I've been more interested in trying to go to the theater more especially with my daughter. I try and take her to go see stuff. And so I took her to go see The Fall Guy. Fun movie. I would say there might be a couple of elements of language in there, but not we're talking about on this. I saw PG-13 movies close to her age, so it makes sense. And there was no nudity or anything like that to deal with. And it was one of those movies that felt like it might burn into her brain of like, she'll remember that one day. And I just bring that up to say is like the theatrical experience nowadays is not the same as it once was, but it is still unique. But in saying that, you went to something that's absolutely crazy that I thought was like, you experienced, and we didn't talk about it on purpose to right now, we're supposed to talk about it, which is, you want to set this up because it was such a crazy idea. And I don't even know what movies you got to see. There was a bet between you and your brother somewhat on what movie it was going to be. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. So I went to. So what happened was we all of a sudden got our local theater here, which is we have several different branded theaters here, but Marcus Theaters and some of the other theaters, I've noticed that Regal's been doing it. I know AMC's been doing it as well. They've been doing mystery movie night, and it's you don't have any idea what you're going to see. and it can't be a movie that's already in theaters. So it's something that hasn't been released, and you get to, sit down at a seat, and you have no idea what you're getting to watch until 7 o'clock, when all of a sudden, boom, there it is on the screen, and
Now,
that's it.
did they show trailers in front of it, or did they just go straight to the movie?
So we've done three of them in the last month, and
Wow.
we've done three of them, and the first one had no trailers at all. Started
Oh, what
exactly
an experience!
7 o'clock.
What an
It
experience! I
was pretty awesome.
applaud that.
It
I
was pretty
applaud
awesome.
that.
And
Yeah.
and then so that's what I was hoping was going to continue. The second time we went had like two trailers, and I really wish they hadn't put it up there, and I'll explain why in a second. And then the third one had like maybe two or three trailers and like three or four commercials. So now they're starting to do the old, shtick
Oh,
with it,
bummer.
where they're
Oh, what a
that's
bummer.
a shame, because I really wish they had just kept it right at 7 o'clock. Boom, first scene pops up, and that's what happened when we saw a movie called Babes, which is a comedy.
I don't even know it.
So I'll lead into this. So we had no idea what this was going to be, right? It could be, we had no idea if it was going to be more indie films or if it was going to be big theatrical stuff. I tend to thought it wasn't going to be big theatrical stuff because they like to leave that stuff for opening weekend. For the box office opening weekend, make as much money as they can. And you can get into this for $5. The ticket price for the mystery movie is $5. So if you're not enjoying it, you're only into it for $5. You're not into it for like 13. But we sat down 7 o'clock first time, and the movie Babe starts. And the first scene, it doesn't open up with credits. So it opens up with this scene of these two women going to this movie theater, which I thought was incredible.
Oh, that's
And
brilliant.
they're constantly sitting there. Well, one of them is pregnant, like very pregnant, like she's getting ready to pop any second. And she keeps sitting there going, "My seat is wet. My seat is wet. My seat is wet." Well,
Oh my God.
her water's broken.
Oh my God.
So it's a brilliant movie. It stars Alana Glazer and Michelle Buteau, who are both comedians, and I laughed pretty much from the start of this film to the end, and in the middle, laughed so hard I couldn't breathe a couple times.
That's fantastic.
And my brother, the great thing about these films is like they've been more on the indie side, and my brother, I would never have been able to get my brother these three movies ever. He would have just been like, if I had told him I was going to watch these three movies, because I see everything at the theater, as you know, but if I had told him we were going to see these three movies, he would have said, "No, I'm good. You go see them by yourself," or with
Right.
mom. Mom would go. My mom would go into any movie with me, but
Right.
point being, he would never have gone, and so he loved it. He actually had a great time at Babes. So we went. He had such a good time that one. We went the next week, and that was a movie called Ezra. That's out. It's directed by Tony Goldwyn, who plays the villain in Ghost,
Yep.
and it has Bobby Cannavale and Rose Byron and Robert De Niro, Whoopi Goldberg. It's a great cast. It's a loaded cast. It's about a kid with autism, and his father takes him on a road trip out to do the Jimmy Kimmel show in Los Angeles.
What a great concept.
Really a cool movie, and I had a blast watching that one too. It's funny. It's got a lot of humor. It's got a very serious plot line to it, but they also add a lot of great humor elements, and it's very heartwarming. It's a great story. So we enjoyed that one. Thing I didn't like about that night as much was because they put two trailers on it, and one of them was the trailer for, like, the director and the producer get up there and they go, "Thank you for coming to see the movie, blah 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 blah, hope you enjoy it." And so we knew what we were watching before it got to the opening credits, the opening scene. So that was kind of a letdown there, but the movie was really good. The third one we saw, a great movie as well. Kathy Bates, Alfre Woodard, um, Diane Keaton, Eugene Levy. It's called
Ooh.
Summer Camp, and it just came out. And so Summer Camp is also a comedy about these people that go back to a summer camp that they were at when they were like 10 years old, and if they go back from 50 years later, they go back to the same summer camp, and it's pretty funny. It's also by a director that we know that we've worked with on the After franchise. So,
Okay.
but it's a good movie, and I had a blast doing these three films with, and my mom went to that one with my brother and I as well. But
Oh, that's great.
she had a great time doing it as well. But again, they showed a few trailers, but it was still didn't know exactly what they were going to show. So a lot of fun. If you get to see one of these mystery movies, I highly recommend getting to go, whether it be at AMC or Regal or Marcus or any of these theaters. If they're doing it, $5, well worth it. Probably going to get a good movie. They do tell you what the rating of the movie will be, and the
Oh,
other
that's
thing
good.
that they do tell you is if it'll be a horror movie, because they know people don't always want to walk in on those.
Yep. Yep. That's good. What a great way to get people back in seats, especially to see indie films. I was going to say, I think it's interesting. I've rented two indie films over the past week or so, just needing something to watch, and I just wanted to experience something that I didn't know what was going to happen. And it's the same effect. I went into both these movies with no knowledge of them. One was called Boy Kills World. I don't know
Yeah,
if you've seen this.
yeah.
When you have a chance, that movie is bananas. I loved every second of it. Loved it. Very violent, so be warned. And then I watched this little indie film last night. I rented it. It's called Snack Shack, and dude, it takes place in 1991, and for this podcast to be about that era to some extent, they're about 2 years older than us in the film, and they were much worse than we were. They were much more into some terrible things, but the rest of it, the innocence of these kids growing, it was just a really good movie. It took me a minute to get into it, but once I engaged, it was great. And I bring that up to say is like these mystery movies are a great way to maybe get you to watch an indie film, or like, as you said, something you may not have. I'd never heard of all three, but they sound fantastic. I wouldn't know about those, and I might not sit down and select to watch them per
Right.
se, or I'd wait for them to be on streaming. But the experience of sitting in the theater blind and this movie popping on, that's a neat effect. I hope they bring it to more theaters across the country. I think it's a
Yeah,
great idea.
on a packed theater on a Monday night, because they were all on
Right.
Monday night. Packed
Right.
theater people. That I like that everybody, believed in the concept enough to want to go to it, and on a Monday night, and these people want to be at the theater. It's
Right.
clear. I mean, they were doing one showing at 7. Then that was so popular they had to add another one for 7:05. Then they had to add another one for 7:20, and that's because they kept selling the theater out. So that's pretty remarkable and makes me very hopeful about the future of cinema.
No, that's killer. It's killer, killer, killer. Um, all right. Well, do you have, that's technically your pick of the week, I assume.
It is.
Is
That's
that,
my pick of
yeah.
the week. Best of the
I'm going to
best
talk
too.
best of best two. There it is. I'm going to throw one in there that's a modern one just for the reference of it, just because I said I would. I looked it up while we were talking. But if you would like to see the movie that Tony, this is not a plug for it, I assure you. But if you would want to see the movie we referenced at the beginning that's connected to Army of Darkness called Convergence, you can find it on, it looks like it's on Peacock, Tubi, the Roku channel, Amazon Prime. Those are all for free, or if you subscribe to any of those, Fandango at home, Plex. And then if you just feel the need to send money to some corporate entity, you can watch it on YouTube, Apple TV, and Google Play. Anyway, it's out there everywhere. So if you want to see that movie that we referenced at the very beginning, it's there for you too. Is there anything else we need to say before we close this episode out?
But hit us up on our socials. We hit us up on the podcast page on Facebook. Back for our future at gmail.com. Anywhere we are, let us know what you're thinking about the show. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, we appreciate every single bit of information, any thought or comment or whatever, good or bad. We want to keep making stuff and grow. So just tell us what your vibes are and see if we can accommodate best we can. Well, that's going to do it for my side of the show. Again, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you all. And I'll let Tony say the last word.
Thank you, everybody. Have a safe week.